From WBRNRadio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. The title of this episode, The End of Open Internet. As we were messing around with the title here, we could have said The End of Open Internet as we know it. But nonetheless, this has to do with the net neutrality rule, and we'll get to it in just a second here. But let me give you just a little bit of a preview of what we're doing here. We'll spend some time on net neutrality and what it means to the consumer as part of our public interest. We'll also get to Obamacare and the enrollment numbers there with Obamacare, and we'll look at we'll look at additional information there from Help Affairs, one of many magazines. We'll also look at latest polling out of the state of Alabama. That's the race between Judge Roy Moore and Mr. Doug Jones down in Alabama. That will go off in December, just as the FCC will meet on December 14th. Let me see, make sure that I got this right. December 14th. So this will be in December when the new chair there, P.A.I., I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. It doesn't really matter anyway. He is the new, as they say, figurehead for the business interests. At one time, they used General Powell, Michael Powell's son. He was on the FCC. Now, this is a big battle. The monopolies here, AT&T, Comcast, Verizon, they are the monopoly internet service providers. If you have one of those, you be very cognizant of what is going on. And at the same time, the Department of Justice, under DJ Trump, would want to block AT&T's merger with Warner. That would be a very big merger there, because then AT&T would not only have Dish TV, and they would have all the content of Time Warner, which includes CNN and many more channels. So they would be able to allow their content to stream at normal rates, whereas the other content, say from Comcast and MSNBC, etc., the NBC empire would not. And that would also affect the Googles of the world, etc. Let me just take care of a little bit of business here and get the ball score. This is in the national baseball, the NBA score. Only one last night. The Bulls were in Los Angeles. The final score was Lakers 103 to Bulls 94. So that is the only score that literally we have. We'll have a number of games coming up over the holidays, and we will address those. Incidentally, we'll also have special Thanksgiving programming, a workers' Thanksgiving holiday, and we've done that for a number of years here. We did it when the late, great Jerry Pippen was still with us. So we'll do one this time around. We have a lot of things to talk about. A lot of things for workers not to be thankful of, and look at workers' famine. There's an interesting article in the Washington Post about an aunt that was a liberal visiting some reactionaries. We'll try to get those kinds of stories on our quote-unquote storyboard. That's one of the things we put together. In other words, that's an outline of the programming. Some of the things we have in the hopper here, President Mugabe, long-serving leader, 37 years in Zimbabwe, was forced to resign. What do they want to call it? When this coup, generic, they want to call it a generic coup, or they want to call it a hybrid coup, or whatever. It was nonetheless a coup instituted by the military. And it begs the old question, can the military substitute a government? I was talking to a lady the other day about Zimbabwe and understanding the structure there. The party there of President Mugabe. Many countries, the new founding countries, I know in Kwame Nkrumah they had a party, ZANU-PF there is a party, the party of the president. In the People's Republic of China, of course, they have the Chinese Communist Party. And the question, is that anti-democratic? No. Here in the U.S., you have basically two social democratic parties. Well, not exactly, but you have two conservative parties, we'll put it at that. One is aspiring to be a social democratic party known as the Democratic Party, but they're both beholding to the monopoly of capitalist interests. And as long as you're doing that, effectively you have a one-party situation. We covered a few weeks ago now, the first November number of races in a number of cities that we recall. First in Seattle, they had a progressive candidate running against a business interest candidate who won by about 60%. And then we went on to the Midwest, Minneapolis, St. Paul. The non-preferred business candidate won in the city of St. Paul, Minnesota, Mr. Carter, against the business interest candidate there. However, though, in Minneapolis, they both incidentally have these ranked choice systems that the Reverend Jesse Jackson and many of us have labeled a racist system. They have it out in Oakland, the Bay Area, San Francisco. But what it delivers basically is we had some character that ended up with basically on the first round of voting, roughly about 25% in a 40% election turnout or whatever. 40 to 50%. I'm not certain what it is, but we'll get it one of these days here. And then on the second ranking, where other candidates with the least number of votes gets eliminated, etc., he ends up with 50% of 50-something% of the vote, literally. And the progressive candidates, because there were so many in the race there, one did, the Bernie endorsed candidate came in second. But is that actually democratic? No. The more democratic form would have been a runoff between number one and number two. And in this particular case, you would have ended up with a candidate that was much more progressive than the one that won the election. Now, that does not mean that candidate would prevail, but you would have contrasts and you would have issues there, and then look at the full dynamics. And this is one of the things that people don't see when they say, well, we're running an issue-oriented campaign. Well, issue-oriented campaigns are based on ideology, period. And now if there's ideological flaws, the campaign itself will be flawed. And this is the same problem you have with the DJ Trump operation, otherwise known as the Trump-Pence gang. We now see net neutrality on the chopping block, or open internet on the chopping block, as a result of this gang. And we see also one of the most draconian tax bills, the mother of all trickle downs coming up there, and they're trying to put it out as a people's tax bill. We'll get to Lisa McCoskey. She's writing in the Fairbanks newspaper, her hometown. But let's first deal with open internet. We'll start with Reuters, and we'll move on. The Federal Communications Agency is set to repeal the landmark 2015 rule that prohibits internet service providers from impeding a consumer access to a web content in a move that promises to recast the digital landscape. PI, whatever his name is, it was appointed by DJ Trump, said the commission will vote on the 14th of December meeting on his plan to rescind the so-called net neutrality rules. Net neutrality establishes the Comcast, Verizon of the world as public utilities, and they should be public utilities. The rule bars broadcast providers from blocking or slowing down access to content and charging consumers for certain content. It will not be now. They will be slowing it down, or you will be paying more money. They were intended to ensure a free and open internet, give consumers equal access to web content, and prevent these so-called broadband providers from favoring their own content. Now, if AT&T gets hold of Warner, they would be definitely doing that. It represents a setback for the Alphabet, that's a Google company, Facebook, which has urged AI not to restrict the rules. Netflix said it opposes the measure to roll back core protections. No doubt they would. And what is very interesting here, Google or Alphabet and Facebook are the new face of many industries. Facebook now is getting even things like the NFL on. Hopefully we'll see some baseball games. Netflix is producing movies. They didn't put Twitter in here, but Twitter also has these NFL games on, which we're boycotting this year. But nonetheless, they are there, and movies are being produced by these. Facebook now has more and more live streaming. I noticed BuzzFeed is coming to Twitter, and this is reshaping many, many things. The commission has 3 Republicans on it, 2 Democrats. The move is all but certain to approve because of the Trump-Pence gang. Now, these people use what we in the political consulting game call a flippable. They call it a power grab by President Obama. It was not a power grab by President Obama. It was addressing the real-world consequences of the net. Because now you have more and more streaming, more than ever. And also at the same time, the costs in terms of the data centers, etc., is less than we've seen in the history of the Internet. We've been here, the modern Internet, since the 90s, so we know what is going on there, period. So, in other words, the cost used to be much more expensive. We talk in terms of equipment. Equipment basically costs less now. Storage is ubiquitous. In other words, it's cheap. It's almost given away. And now we have the cloud, whereas the cloud is not inexpensive, but it does provide a much better system. Many of the outlets, in fact, I guess all of them that we use, are in the cloud, whether it be iHeartRadio, the Blog Talk outlet, the Sprinter outlet, the Stitcher outlet, and many more. The Apple, to a lesser extent, use them. But anyway, they're all in the cloud. And we at Cranston have some of our stuff in the cloud also. We're in the Google cloud. We're in the Amazon cloud. We didn't mention them. But we're in the IBM cloud with Watson Analytics. So we're everywhere. Anyway, the proposal would prevent state and local governments from creating their own net neutrality rules. Now that is pushing it because is inherently an interstate service. Well, the internet is more than an interstate service. It is a global service. The prescription is most likely to handcuff democratic governed states, localities that could consider their own plans to protect consumers' equal access to the internet. Now, this is an interesting situation. In most instances, the Republican Party, since Richard Milhouse Nixon, has talked about state sovereignty. In fact, they talked about state sovereignty in the 2016 campaign. Beauregard, Sessions accompanied there. And that whole idea of state sovereignty goes back to the Civil War. That's why it was fought. The South wanted to perpetuate the feudal barbaric system of slavery on the so-called states' rights, and the Northern forces did not. And when they separated from the Union, that was the final straw right there. Not that they were all that happy about liberation of the quote-unquote slaves. Had been indentured for 40 years. Anyway, nonetheless, this is the situation we have. And all through the history in the 60s, when the apartheid was, in the 50s and 60s, when the apartheid, and before that, in the 40s, when apartheid was officially there was always, from Bilbo and the rest of these bozos, the talk of states' rights, state sovereignty. In fact, you had a sovereignty commission in Mississippi, literally, to terrorize as a citizens front group for the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan, which terrorized African Americans. So this whole thing of states' rights is ingenuous. There's no doubt about that. When you start talking about other types of laws, you want to leave that to the states. For instance, regulations of hourly wages. You want to leave those to the states, with the exception of these Republican representatives in state legislatures who want to knock the cities out, because in most of these states, the urban areas are the backbone. Texas, for instance, if you go to Dallas, Fort Worth area, you go to Houston, San Antonio, etc., that is where the money is. That is where the brains are. The rural areas, they're just out there. Not to mean that they're not people out there that have brains. Yes, they are, but they're fewer. Fewer concentrations. They have fewer concentrations of universities, etc. As they say, what the U.S. is built on, the future of the U.S. And this is so much around the internet. We have various functions now. The universities at they're online universities from MIT to Harvard, etc., that offer classes, many of them for credit or certificates, others for, as they say, enrichment or advancement without a certificate, but the learning situation is there. The open net provides open knowledge, and we are very big on this, and open source software, open hardware. Those are the kinds of things that we champion, and all of these are things around the open internet, and internet being accessible to people. We have what's called a digital divide. This will further divide the digital situation because it will cost more. And when you get into urban areas, a disproportionate number of people there have access to Facebook, Twitters, etc., from mobile devices. So what these people would like to do is raise the rates for mobile devices. Comcast, if you have them, you can have wireless service from Comcast to supplement your mobile service. But they could charge you more on that. And, of course, because of Netflix and those various outlets will be caught, and they will be, of course, having to pass it on to consumer. So rates will go up, and this will create not a very good situation, period. Now, according to this article, the FCC will no longer be in the business of micromanaging business. That's just an absolute lie. Preemptively prohibiting service and applications and product could be a pro-competition. Well, the problem there is when you have these so-called monopolies, you're not going to get into competition. Utterly impossible. They'll fix it all. That's illegal. We should set simple rules. But this is not a simple Simon operation. Tim Wheeler, who headed the FCC under President Barack Obama, advocated for net neutrality rules, calling the planned repeal a shameful sham, a sellout. Even for the FCC and its leadership, this proposal raises hypocrisy to new heights. Now, the Comcast Verizon have said repealing the rule could lead to billions of dollars in additional broadband investment. They are lying, eliminating the possibility that a future presidential administration could regulate internet pricing. No matter what this is from Comcast, it would not block, fraud, or discriminate against lawful content. We wonder. Verizon said it believes the FCC will reinstate a framework that protects consumers across access to the open internet without forcing them to bear heavy costs from unnecessary regulation. Liars. The Internet Association, representing Google, etc., said the proposal represents an end to net neutrality as we know it, and it defies the will of millions of American people. No doubt about this. You see, the Republicans used to call this overreaching. In their case, it's not overreaching. It is what they have been trying to do for 20 years now. Period. The proposal requires internet service providers to disclose whether they are blocking or slowing down a consumer web access and permitting so-called internet fast lanes to facilitate a process called paid prioritization of charging for certain content. Disclosures would make it easier for another agency, the Federal Trade Commission, to act against internet service providers. Well, the whole problem there is, would they act? More than likely not. In New York, the Attorney General there disclosed Tuesday that he's been investigating for 6 months in a bid to learn who is behind the filing of some of these false contents. They've had that again. Nancy Pelosi said the FCC would move would hurt consumers and chill competition, saying the agency has launched another all-out assault on entrepreneurship, innovation, and competition in the heart of the net. There's no doubt about that, because more and more enterprises are getting into the business, particularly when you get to streaming. Streaming is becoming very, very big, and so is internet radio, which we're on now. It's moved on to traditional radio stations like the iHeart, now Carrot, and many more care these programs. Part of the hang-up has been, do we call these shows the internet radio, and then they jumped off rail and got into podcasting, which nobody understands. So now the move is back to more internet radio, and let's include in that also the satellite platforms like Sirius, etc., and you will see more and more of those. And as cars, of course, advance now with internet connections in them, or you can obviously connect via your mobile phone, as people do for us on things like Stitcher, iHeart, etc. All of these outlets have mobile applications, so you can sit in the car and listen to us. Anyway, let me just move on here. This is the open letter here to the chair, Pei. This is from the Attorney General of New York. Recently announced, under your leadership, would release new rules to dismantle your agency's existing net neutrality protection under Title II of the Communication Act, which shields the public from anti-consumer behavior of the giant cable companies that provide high-speed internet to most people. In today's digital age, the rule has governed the operation and delivery of internet service to hundreds of millions of Americans are critical to the economic, social well-being of the nation. Yet the process the FCC has employed to consider potential sweeping alternatives to current net neutrality rules has been corrupted by a fraudulent use of Americans' identity, and the FCC has been unwilling to assist my office in these efforts to investigate. That is about his investigation, and we'll put this on the show page. Specifically, for 6 months, my office has been investigating who perpetrated a mass scheme to corrupt FCC notice and comment process through the misuse of erroneous numbers of real New Yorkers and other Americans' identity. Now, this was not Russian bots that's at business here. As such, a conduct likely violates state law, yet the FCC has refused to multiple requests for crucial evidence in its sole possession, but is vital to permit the law enforcement agencies to proceed. In April 2017, the FCC announced it issued a notice of proposed rulemaking concerning, this is all agencies required to do that, on the Administration Act. It was Act in the 60s, learned that from Administrative Law course a long time ago. Concerning the repeal of existing net neutrality rules, federal law requires the FCC and all agencies to take public comment on proposed rules into account. So it's important that the public comment process enable voices of millions of individuals and businesses who are effective to be heard. Vastly important, no matter one's position on net neutrality, environmental rules, and so many others. In April, researchers and reporters discovered the FCC public comment processing was being corrupted by submission of erroneous fake comments concerning public repeal of net neutrality. In doing so, the perpetrators attacked what is supposed to be an open public process by attempting to drown out and negate the views of real people, businesses, and others who honestly comment on this important issue, whom, while some of these fake comments use made up names and addresses, Many misuse the real names and addresses of actual people as part of an effort to undermine the integrity and to undermine the integrity of the comment process. That's akin to identity theft, and it happened on a massive scale. My office analyzed the fake comments and found that tens of thousands of New Yorkers may have had their identities misused in the way. Indeed, analysis shows that in all, hundreds of thousands of Americans were likely victimized by the way in which tens of thousands per state in California, Georgia, Missouri, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas, and possibly others, impersonation and other misuse of a person's ID violates New York law. So our office launched an investigation successfully investigating this sort of illegal conduct requires the participation of the agencies whose system was attacked. So on June of 2017, we contacted the FCC to request certain records related to public that were necessary to the investigation. Our request for logs and records at least 9 times over 5 months: June, July, August, September, and October, all 3 times in November. We reached out to assistance to multiple top FCC officials, including your 3 successive acting general counsel or the inspector there. We received no substantive response to our investigative request. The investigation isn't about substantive issues concerning net neutrality. For my part, I have long been a public advocate for strong net neutrality rules under Title II. But this isn't about it. It's about the right to control one's own identity. Misuse of identity online by hundreds of thousands should concern everyone. We have a powerful reason to hold accountable those who steal identity. So in other words, it's about identity theft. I encourage the FCC to reconsider its refusal to assist my office, law enforcement investigators, to identify and hold accountable those who illegally misuse so many New Yorkers' identity and to corrupt the public comment process. In an era where foreign governments have indisputably tried to use the internet and social media to influence our election, federal and state governments should be working together to ensure that multi-level actors that cannot subvert our administrative agency's decision-making. Eric T. Schneiderman, Attorney General State of New York. But we get that in there so that we understand what's going on. We went to various sources here, including New York Times. Some technical the Times article is a victory for telecoms, no doubt about that, and we will not rehash what has already been, as they say, hashed. From Facebook, we're disappointed that the proposed announcement today by the FCC fails to maintain the strong and net neutrality protections that would ensure the Internet remains open for everyone. That is from Mr. Egan, Vice President at Facebook. We will work with all stakeholders committed to the principle. Okay, so here we go. Small online companies believe the proposal would hurt innovation because telecom companies could force them to pay more for faster connections. Only the large companies, they say, would be able to afford the expense of making sure the sites receive preferential treatment. Companies like, Pinterest, not our favorite company there. And let me finish this article up here so we don't miss anything. The proposal released would probably make its way to court as well. Companies like Google, Facebook, no doubt they'll challenge it. The coordination of a large online protest against the possible changes in July. So that is where the Times stood. And let me just make sure. Okay, we go into healthcare now. the enrollment here in Obamacare. About 300,000 people have signed up for health insurance at the Affordable Care Marketplace. The first 2 weeks of government enrollment. 1.5 million people, and it was 1 million there. And let's see, 10 million in 2016. Looks like here the Obama administration cut the enrollment process in half to 45 days from 3 months of sign-ups. So in other words, they did everything. They cut advertisement, you name it. The usual 2 spikes during the enrollment period. One is in the middle, and the next one is at the end. And the coverage starts on the 1st of January. The final spike tends to be the high share of young and healthy people who are more likely to sign up as a result of outreach and advertising. These 2 groups are also critical to the law's success. During the last enrollment period, the Trump administration canceled the ads before the deadline, and the enrollment spike would be whittled down, no doubt about that. And some research here, and we'll go to it right now. This is Health Affairs. You've probably not heard of them. The web's first repealed the TV ads, increased enrollment during the first period. Now, it changed to the first here. In the fall of 2013, television viewers in many media markets saw numerous ads about the new Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. The ad informed consumers about insurance products and how to enroll. A new study released by Health Affairs as a web first looks at the county-level data on the uninsured and Medicaid enrollment rates for adults younger than 65 in 2013-2014, found a strong and stable association between the volume of insurance advertising and we'll put this on incidentally, and insurance and health insurance gains in counties. For 629 counties included in the study, the average uninsured rate fell by 2.9%. These points from that's 2013-2014, and the decline was larger for counties and larger ad volumes. The average media market, including the study, ran 3,206 ads during enrollment period. The offers, Wilcox, Brim, Colleen Berry, Fowler, etc. Estimate for an additional 1,000 for every additional 1,000 insurance ads. There's an average decline in insurance of 1/10 percentage point of the uninsured. Sorry about that. This is the first study to link insurance coverage with Obamacare-related market efforts to obtain their data. The extracted county-level data on the uninsured Medicaid enrollment rates for Americans younger than 65 from the Census Bureau American Community Survey. 1 year estimate 13 and 14. They obtained television ad volumes from Kantar Media Campaign Media Analyst Group through Westland Media Project. State-sponsored ads that have strong relations in the declines of the uninsured. The office found that the volume of advertising during that period varied, with more TV ads aired in the Southwest, fewer in the upper North Central regions. This study demonstrates that consumers are responsive to persuasive health care beyond the implementation of the ACA. Since any new health insurance system is currently being debated in Congress, would rely upon marketing to attract customers, a study which was supported by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So that is it, and a very interesting study. Well, this is March 16th of 2017 from Health Affairs. All right. We'll move past this particular one. Yeah, we got it. Okay. From net neutrality, we go willy-nilly here. Something on to, let's see, where are we going now? To Alabama.com. And these are new polls. New Senate polls have Roy Moore in the lead. Doug Jones-Net, this is the Alabama.com. 3 weeks before the election, 2 Alabama state polls are released. Show Tuesday illustrate different pictures of the race between Moore and Jones. Raycom News Media in Alabama has, and we have their poll here, has Roy Jones ahead by 2 points, while a poll released by Britbar, and this is the infamous alt-right people, show him with a 6-point lead. I don't know what their margin of error is. Moore held an 11-point lead at Raycom's released a day before the Washington Post came in. Raycom's poll had Moore with 47% of the vote, Jones with 45% of the vote, and 5% are still undecided, 3% are going to write in. It's a very large poll. 3,000 likely voters were surveyed by mobile-based strategic research, and that poll has a margin of error of 2%. That's a very low margin of error, incidentally. Raycom did not say when the poll was conducted. That's kind of shady there. When asked, what do you think about the allegations against Judge Moore, 45% believed some of them, 34% did not believe the allegation, and 21% believed all the allegations, but it didn't change their minds, according to Raycom. Amongst Republicans, 48% said they did not believe that. The Britbar poll was conducted by WTS Consulting, and it said a sample, of 11,000 likely voters from November 18th to 20th. The poll has Moore at 46.4% and Jones at 40.5%, with a large element, 13.1%, undecided. And this is suspicious here, as both polls are the margin of error at 1.5%. A previous poll conducted had Moore an 11-point lead. This WTS Consulting did work for Moore's campaign during the Republican primary earlier this year. So it's the in-house operation here. And let me see what these Britbar characters are up to. I want to be bad as T here. Start cursing. Anyway, this is the Britbar poll here by 6 points. And basically it says the same thing. The survey shows Moore's downtick, downtick slightly there, but he still holds 5.9, according to John Wall. Told Britbar News, undecideds have the most significant increase, had the most, while Jones has also gained some support over the last 10 days. Polling has been all over the place in the special election. I've seen numbers ranging from Moore being 10 points up and being 8 points down, and no doubt about this. There has been polling where President Obama had a higher favorable rating than DJ Trump. I don't know what the hell that has to do with it. I wanted to survey a mass sampling of registered voters and let them speak for themselves. 11,000. The polls like this are notoriously inaccurate. The survey comes on the heels of let's see what is going on the heels of here, of a Fox News poll. But Jones is up by 8%, a favorable rate there. So we're just all over the place there. The survey comes after Moore weathered one of the biggest scandals around. No doubt about that. And that has kind of died down a bit. And Moore's team has battled the allegations vociferously by framing this as a fight between him and Washington establishment. No doubt about that. This kind of goes with an article in the Real Clear Politics. Let's see if I can find that real quickly here somewhere. Now, this is the new poll here. Well, no, I guess it's not. New poll shows Moore in a statistical tie. This is WBRC poll here. This is a Raytheon poll. Yeah, 45, 5% undecided, 3% on a write-in going on here. So it's a statistical tie. Well, that's one way of putting it. Now, also here at Real Clear, this is Alabama Senate race. It shows national parties waning influence. This is by a staff writer here, James Arkin. The Senate race next month, the national political parties are either punching bags or anvils. Roy Moore is increasingly running against the Republican establishment. They have to top officials there. Now, DJ Trump has endorsed Roy Moore. Moore struggle and the shock of the allegations have tilted the race slightly, providing an opening for Mr. Doug Jones to compete in Ruby Red, Alabama. This is where DJ Trump beat Hillary the Monster Clinton by 30 points. To be expected. The parties are dead, although dead are in a zombie state where they're walking around, but unrecognizable from for their uselessness. That is from Scott Jennings. You remember him? He was a former George G.W. Bush official and political advisor to Mitch McConnell. Moore is running away from the Republicans, and Jones is running away from the Democrats, yet they are running to be represented by their parties. This isn't emblematic of the end of the two-party system. I don't know what. Well, there's no doubt about that. It is changing. That's back to the discussion we had earlier with a lady about political parties. This is in Zimbabwe. Anyway, polling for both parties is grim. Gallup in September found Democrat underwater, 44% favorable rating, 51% unfavorable rating. They haven't been above water since immediately following the re-election of President Barack Obama in 2012. Meanwhile, 36% of registered voters view the Republican Party favorably, less, and 59% it's unfavorable. In September, 1/4 of Democrats had a negative view of their own party. Just below a quarter of Republicans say the same thing. But that means, 3/4 of them are still there. The fallout allegations against Moore, which were first reported in the Washington Post 2 weeks ago. And this is very unusual itself, that a scandal like this goes along, but it is warped into other things now. We have went from Mr. Weissman to the demise, very quick demise of Charlie Rose. He was kicked out today, fired, gone. And then an allegation around taking of a picture at a state fair with Al Franken, which a lady was telling was kind of flimsy because her husband was there and everybody's smiling, merry-making with that one. And then we come up later with the dean of the House, Representative John Conyers, a decent man, but had settled a sexual harassment suit in 2015. And immediately, the House Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi, called for an ethics investigation. This is just crazy. Anyway, Moore told Breitbart over the weekend they have taken a calculated risk for 2 years with a Democrat and tried to elect another Republican in 2 years, and then they will want me out. So that's what's going on. I think it is a travesty of justice, and I think it is certainly not Republican in nature. That's an interesting take on it Roy Jones has. They elect Mr. Jones, and then 2 years later they kick his ass out. I'm getting as bad as H here. Even with the scandal, the window for Jones is narrowed. Moore won nearly 100,000 votes in his primary runoff against Lupus Strangelove than the total Democrats who voted in the primary. It's changed a little. Jones has focused on nonpartisan issues such as kitchen table issues of fixing health care, without mentioning, of course, a Democrat there. So in other words, the eyes run a little away from the party. That doesn't really matter. The party itself is jammed. Let's see. John Ancelon, Democratic pollster based in Alabama, says Jones' campaign simply reflects that he's attempting to ignite a small Democratic base while reaching moderates and soft Republicans turned off by more. No doubt about that. Moving in that direction, that is the direction that he is forced to move in, the Democratic base in Alabama that was once a larger base of a very conservative party, but it is, as they say, no more. As Democrats start winning, as they did in Virginia and some of these other places across the country, and we kind of continue to win, some of that will self-correct. That's Avalon there. No doubt about it. Mr. Jenkins is a congressional reporter for Real Clear Politics, etc. So this will end it for us. The open internet, the end of the open internet as we know it on the 22nd of November 2017. Incidentally, the 22nd of November is the anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963 in Dallas, Texas. This will be what, 1963, 54 years, something like that. Anyway, we'll check that out, and we'll get a program up on that.